things, but
Most likely to be victimized by people in your own family or peer group.
yeah, that's true. And it's also professional criminals tend to be, but that doesn't make good TV. But have a rich guy do it, that makes great TV. Because again, we associate all these negative attributes, and yet none of those negative attributes are real in terms of what it really takes to be a successful businessman. So being self-interested in the proper sense, is about those attributes. To be a success in business, to be truly self-interested, qua businessman, means to have those attributes. Those are not about lying, cheating, stealing. But they're not about self-sacrifice. And Ayn Rand's argument is that is what the real self-interest is. What selfishness really means is it means being rational, being just, being honest, being productive, having integrity, having pride. That's what real self-interest, not the lying, stealing, cheating. That's, my term for that is self-destructive, because I think all of those behaviors are self-destructive in business and in life. But that the real alternative to living for other people, being selfless and so on, that nobody wants, and really is a pretty crummy morality if you think about it. You only live once. Why would you live for other people? Their life better than yours? More important than yours? Why? How did that come about? Right? That there is a real alternative, and that alternative is this morality of self-interest, which I think powers achievers, powers success, but they don't know it. They don't know that they're being moral, because nobody talks about morality in those terms. When we talk about morality, again, we talk about it in terms of selflessness. So they feel guilty, even though they're rational and successful and productive and honest and have integrity and all these things. They don't associate any of those terms with morality. What they associate with morality is selflessness. They're not that. They feel guilty. And to me, that guilt is what is causing our drift away from capitalism. To me, that guilt is what is moving our society away from free markets. And what causes these businessmen to take pride in their community service and not in their business achievement. I like to tell them, America was founded in 1776, third-rate colony. The British barely cared about us. They didn't really fight. That's why we won, right? By 1914, the United States was the strongest economic power on the face of the earth, by far. We entered World War I, it was over. Until we entered, it was still. So militarily, economically, the most powerful. 130, 40 years, right? And we achieved that because of community service and charity? No, we achieved that because of profit-seeking businessmen. Because people went out there and built stuff and created stuff. And that's why, we created a middle class, the poor rose up and established a life of themselves. How many people were poor in 1700? As a percentage. Basically all. 95%, 99% of the population was poor. Right? And then there were some aristocrats. If you look, there's a famous chart of wealth per capita in human history. And I'll go in there. 10,000 years ago, over here. Okay, so this is wealth per capita in human history, and this is where it goes like this. And then it goes like that. And when does it turn? I like to say 1776. Two things happened in 1776. Founding of America, what's the second one? Wealth of Nations is published. So whether it's 1776 or not, it's symbolically 1776. That's what happened. And that's business. That's capitalism. That's freedom. That's free markets. That's what generates that. And yet we're rejecting them, in my view, because of this dual moral, this false moral code that we uphold, which is destroying our perception of business and free markets and capitalism. So if we want capitalism, if we want to be self-fulfilled as business leaders, which those of you business students hopefully do, you want to be successful, you want to feel good about yourself being successful, then what you need to reject is this morality of selflessness. And adopt this morality, Ayn Rand's moral code, a morality of self-interest, a morality of egoism, but not the false self-interest, the false egoism that our philosophers teach us that exists, of lying, stealing, cheating, but a morality of production, of rationality, of integrity, pride, independence, that morality. And that will lead to success in business, in life, and will lead to a sense of pride about your real achievements, not the pseudo-achievements. Thank you all.
We're going to have a brief, or however long it needs to be, question and answer period. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and
So, Yaron, one of the things that I think we take some pride in is the fact that American society is incredibly charitable. There's a lot of charitable giving. And I don't know if the conclusion is that we're doing it because we're guilty or because we're good people. What's your sense on it?
So my sense is that a lot of it is done out of a sense of guilt. I believe, and if you go back into the 19th century, where we were free, where there was very little taxation, government spending during the 19th century, total government spending, state, local, federal, was maxed out at like 7%. Right? So federal spending was about 4%, and the rest was about 3%. Today, we're over 40%. To give you a sense of the role of government and the level of taxation which would result as a consequence. People are far more charitable and far more generous during the 19th century than they are even today. I think some of that was motivated by guilt, but I think a lot of that was motivated by benevolence, by just a benevolence towards other people. And I think that a freer world, a egoistic world, a world in which we didn't feel this guilt, would be a charitable. Now, it wouldn't be indiscriminately charitable. Some people don't deserve charity. It would be a discriminating charity. But I don't believe that people who value their own life, who want to live a successful, prosperous, happy life, want there to be segments of the population that truly suffer. Now, I also think that those segments are small. The fact is you don't need much charity. Because the way in which you help most people is by giving them a job, and that's not help, it's a trade. So if you create enough jobs, think about 19th century America. It started out with a very small population in America and absorbed millions and millions of immigrants. And they all found jobs. Unemployment rates in the 19th century were very low. And they absorbed these immigrants, and jobs were created because the economy was free. Unemployment, in my view, is a consequence of statism. It's not a consequence of markets. So in capitalism, the way in which you're helping the poor and the way you're helping most people is the fact that there are jobs available to them. And therefore, the number of people who need help is small. And charity is plentiful. So I think there are two elements driving charity. Benevolence, which I think is a positive element, which I think is a good element. I have respect for every human being unless it proves otherwise. Right? But everybody's a potential trader. This is why, my view, more people on the planet, the better, right? The more people on the planet, the more people I can trade with, the more win-win relationships I have, right? The better off we all are. So I don't buy this, we can't go over 11 billion or 6 billion or whatever. No, the more the better. We'll figure out what to do with them as they come, right? So there's a certain benevolence towards other human beings. I mean, think about how we take care of our pets. Or how we take care of plants. We don't let plants just die. You water them, you take care of them. These are human beings. They're much more valuable than a pet or a plant. So there's benevolence, but then I think a lot of it is driven by guilt. And therefore it's misguided often. So a lot of people give to charities. Let's take Bill Gates, for example. Bill Gates lives in Seattle. His kids go to school in that area. They're going to grow up in that area. Yet, when he gives, he's giving in Africa. Now, my view is, the reason he gives to Africa is to distance the giving as much as possible from his own self-interest. It's a perception type of thing, right? There's a lot of work to be done in Seattle. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen the show The Killing. It's pretty brutal, but it's filmed in Seattle, and this last season's episodes were all about these kids who live on the streets in Seattle and the horrific conditions under which they live. These are kids who run away from home because they've got abusive parents or something. And they live in these houses. Yeah, Bill Gates' money, you could help these kids, really help these kids. They don't have shelters because there are not enough shelters and things like that. He puts his money in Africa because he wants to be perceived as moral, as virtuous. He has to distance himself from the result as much as possible. I like to say, you know, people still don't trust Bill Gates because he seems to be having fun giving his money away. For him to become a saint, for us to think of it, it's true. But for him to be perceived as like Mother Teresa, what would he have to do?
Really miserable.
Yeah, he'd have to give up all this money, move into a tent, and if he could bleed a little bit, you know, then we'd say, wow, nobody would want to be here. But everybody would say, wow, now there's somebody committed to his values and virtuousness, right? So we have this false view of how we do our charity. I think our charity would be more effective, would be more focused, would be focused on what we care about rather than dispersed. I just think if people brought the same self-interest that they bring to their business into their charity work, it would be more successful. And there is a movement right now, what's it called, entrepreneurial, social entrepreneurs or something like that, where people are trying to approach charity like a business. And you know, I don't think it's all motivated by good things, but it's a more of an approach to charity that is focused on, you know, real values versus appeasing guilt. Yeah.
I think maybe you're talking about conscious capitalism. I think that's a book that's out.
No, I don't like conscious capitalism.
So I guess my viewpoint is from the perspective of a business owner. So I remember reading The Fountainhead back in high school and just remembering, you know, the whole altruism versus, you know, being selfish, and I really thought work was right, and, you know, and then now, you know, many years after college, and this is our 8th year in business, and I have a few employees that work closely with us who are starting to see our success because they work basically from our home office,
Yeah.
so they can see maybe some material things we may acquire or vacation, so they can see things, but you know, they haven't been with us for 8 years. They come and go. They might have just worked for a few months or a year. But based on speaking with them, I can tell the mindset from their perspective as a 20-something-year-old with college degrees, with parents who put them through college, or you know, they're middle-class kids.
Yeah.
I'm kind of afraid of how they think because they're the next generation. And they really do buy what they're hearing from media and what they've been taught in school, which is that anyone who has money is kind of like, you know, like bad, or like, you know, like taking from them, taking their productivity and achieving success on their backs. Right.
No, and this is an old story. It's just, I think this generation is more infected with it than previous, just because it keeps intensifying. But my mother told me seriously when I was growing up that anybody who's a millionaire is a crook. I mean, you can't make $1 million unless you cheat, lie, and steal. That's the only way to make it, you know. It took me a while to figure out that it's the reverse, right? It's very hard to make $1 million if you're lying, cheating, and stealing. But yes, I mean, we're growing up in an age, Ayn Rand called it the age of envy. And there's definitely an age of envy, but think about this moral code. Because think about a moral code that says that a person's moral responsibility is to serve others, to live for others, to give to others. And you're poor, and you're young, you're the other. You're expecting people to give to you, because you're this other. You don't have anything to give. And yet, here's your boss, and he's not giving you as much. So, you know, there's a real conflict there. There's envy. Envy is a product of this morality. It necessitates envy. So, I hate you, I resent you, because your moral responsibility, your moral duty is to make my life better. Not to make your life better, make my life better. And when I have a lot, it'll be my moral responsibility to help somebody else. But that's a whole setup. And once you present that setup, anybody who doesn't have stuff, and there's always somebody who doesn't have relative to wealthy people, is going to resent the wealthy. The more statist we become, the more, you know, selfless we become, the more altruistic we become, the more envy and resentment and hatred of the rich you will have. And you see this a lot more in Europe than you do in America. Because America is still a land of individualism. It's still you make yourself, you build it, you create it, although you don't build it anymore, right? Obama said you didn't build it. So we're becoming like Europe. But in Europe, rich people, some rich people in some countries, they won't drive fancy cars. Because people so resent it, are so antagonistic towards wealth, that the wealthy are very fearful. You see that in Scandinavian countries, and it's why they're willing to accept higher taxes and more of an equalization. It's because they literally fear other people because it's at such a level. And in the social life, if somebody has, you're chided for showing off your wealth or for being too ostentatious. There's a little bit of that here, right, in the U.S., but less than in Europe. I can't prove this, and I don't know if this is true. But I don't know if you know Stephen Cohen, the hedge fund guy in New York, one of the big billionaires, and his hedge fund was just forced to close because of supposed insider trading. It's a very broad definition of insider trading they have these days. Stephen Cohen is known for being extravagant, ostentatious. He's been criticized in the media, he's been criticized by people all over the place for being that type of person. His practices are not that different than many other hedge funds, but he's the one they chose to go after. These things drive, so what's the next hedge fund guy going to do? He's going to hide it. He's not going to buy the $500 million painting or whatever it was that, he did, because they're fearful. And that's the sad state of the world when you fear, the product of your own achievement. It's very sad.
Yeah, what would your advice be to someone like Michael Milken, not only like a modern day person? I know you like to talk about him and say that he defended himself unwisely by talking about how much he gave to charity. How should these people defend themselves if not?
Well, Michael Milken, personally, Michael Milken is one of my heroes. I think he was an amazing financier. If you study the history of American business in the 70s and 80s, I think he had a crucial role in restructuring American business and making it a lot more productive than it had been, and really changing the face of both finance, but really of business itself. And then if you look at the companies he financed, I don't know how many of you know Michael Milken, but every early technology in a telecommunications stage was financed by Drexel Burnham, which is his company, through the use of what they call junk bonds, whether it was McGraw Cellular, for a cellular company, it was cable company. All the telecommunication industry was funded originally with these bonds that then became called junk bonds and ridiculed. By the way, it's a huge market today. People they call them high yield bonds today. But in those days, and he went to jail. There was an effort to go after this guy and to destroy him, and it was a concentrated effort. It was led by Giuliani. Giuliani built his political career after going after Michael Milken. And in the end, they cut a deal with him where he pleaded guilty to 10 things that if it were anybody else, they would have got a slap on the wrist and they would have been a little fine and sent home. He got in front of the judge and he gave his whole spiel about how much he gives to this research and that charity and this charity and that charity. And then the judge said, "We're going to make an example of you. You got 10 years in jail. 10 years in jail for trivial stuff." What I would have done is not cut a deal. And the reason, by the way, he cut a deal, supposedly, is they were going after his family. They were going after everybody. These are mafia tactics that the Justice Department engages in when they go after businessmen, in my view. They were using, in the 80s, they started using RICO. RICO was passed. RICO is a piece of legislation passed to go after organized crime. And the idea with RICO is you freeze the assets, because with organized crime, if you don't freeze the asset and you go after, they move the assets out of your reach. Today, they use RICO on anything. They freeze assets. There was just a court case recently where the judge threw it out because the Justice Department froze assets. They accused, I can't remember what they accused them, some stock manipulation or something, and they use this on financiers more than anybody else, on business, basically. The same tactics they use on organized crime. I would have not cut a deal. I would have stood up and argued the merits of the case. I would have gone to trial. I think he would have won on the merits of the case. I don't think he did anything wrong. Even the things that he admitted to, I don't think he did. And I would have been incredibly proud of his achievements. I mean, it's hard to place yourself in 1989 and look back on the 10, 15 years of his career and how much that guy achieved, how much he changed the world for the better in real, deep, significant ways. And he was banned from the financial industry for life. And, you know, he could have had he was still young. He was still, I think, in his early 40s. So he had a whole career in front of him still, and he was banned.
Dr. Brook, can I supplement something that you just,
Sure.
just said? It's often forgotten. I don't know how old you are, but I was of an age when Milken was being, run out of town on a rail.
I was here at UT.
Oh, really?
Finishing my MBA. Those days.
It's often forgotten that Milken started out in a scholarly way. He started out, you might know this, but he started out with a scholarly analysis of the historical performance of bonds.
Absolutely.
And he looked and he saw that bonds that had a high risk premium actually wound up with a better total return. So he was on completely good factual grounds. Nobody remembers this. Nobody remembers that he actually had an academic background.
Yep. He did, and he was hired because of the paper he wrote about that, and he traded, and he made money, and they kept giving him more and more money. And he turned Drexel Burnham, which was a third-rate small investment bank. When it went bankrupt, Drexel Burnham was the biggest investment bank on Wall Street, bigger than, at the time, Merrill Lynch and Solomon Brothers and Goldman Sachs and all these guys. And you can tell the whole story of why they went bankrupt and what drove them to that, but that's way beyond. The point is, he should have been proud, he should have stood up, and he should have defended himself on the facts and on his record, and his record in business, not his record in charity. Let me go that way. Yeah.
So you started your talk with sort of drawing a distinction between what an athlete does sort of on the conceptual level and what a businessman CEO does, which is sort of more conceptual. And I think that's that's true, but I think with some reflection, folks can see that, all right, I really couldn't be Bill Gates. It's complex, it's building software, it's running this huge multinational corporation. You look at sort of some of the more recent anti-capitalist movements, for example, like Occupy Wall Street. And when they were on the street, they weren't saying down with Microsoft, down with well, sometimes, but down with General Motors, things that people that make values that are like obviously out there in the world. They're saying it's the bankers, it's the secondary markets and secondary security markets and things like that. Can you address how those kind of financial services companies do create value and are, I'm not an Occupy Wall Street.
No, it's a great question, and it's exactly, I think it reinforces my point. So the most perceptual level is the athlete, and you get that. At the next step, there's Microsoft, right? I use a Microsoft product. Okay, I get that. But then there's the banker, who I would argue makes it possible for Microsoft to exist, makes it possible for Microsoft to make the product that you benefit from, but is in the background, is in the shadows. I would even argue makes it possible for LeBron James to make $50 million. There wouldn't be a building, there wouldn't be any of that stuff without the banker in the background, funding it, providing the capital, and so on. So the more perceptual, the easier it is for people to comprehend. The more abstract, finance being the most abstract of all of these, the more difficult it is for them to comprehend the value of it. But my view is, and this is not based on the fact that my PhD is in finance, but I think that I'm not biased. That is also the levels of the value added. The bank adds the most value. Because if you think about what the role of financial markets and institutions is, the role of financial markets and institutions is to allocate capital on an economy-wide, on a region-wide basis. It's not just one company. It's the fact that I'm choosing Microsoft over, what was the previous, I'm choosing GM over the buggies. Because think about it, it's not the customers that chose the GM over the buggies initially. It was somebody had to finance Ford in order to build automobiles because they believed in automobiles. And by doing that, usually at the same time, defunding the buggy industry, right? Not letting them expand, letting the automobile, and then the customers get it, right? So at a macro level, nobody does more to allocate resources than the banking industry. They make Bill Gates possible. And that's true of venture, but it also, when he grows, he takes bank loans, he goes public, he needs Goldman Sachs to underwrite it, he needs to control his risk, so he needs derivatives, swaps, whatever the type of derivatives that he might engage in. All of these things are what make possible for these businesses to grow and expand. But think about a bank saying, because, when they're good, right? They have this kind of hilltop view and saying, no, I'm not gonna invest in this industry. Think about the stock market, right? Stock's going down. What does that represent? Bad future prospects. This industry, good future prospects. The bond market does the same thing. Bankers do the same thing. So they're making the decision, and that's at a macro level. At an individual level, J.P. Morgan used to say when he was in front of Congress, they brought him to heckle him and to abuse him, just like they do today. And this is 1913. And he was asked, the financial statements and all this stuff that he needs in order to decide alone, because they were trying to show he's corrupt. And he said, I don't look at financial statements. There's only one criteria by which I decide who to loan money to and who don't. And the congressman asked him, what is that? And he said, character. I lend to people with character, and I don't lend to people without character, and that you can't capture in a balance sheet. So the decision of which businessmen to support, which businessmen not to support. I'm sure there were other people trying to do what Bill Gates did, didn't get the money to do it, didn't get the venture capital. The guy who gave Apple the first check. Steve Jobs stunk, literally stunk. He had long hair, he didn't believe in showering, really didn't believe in showering. The guy was and yet somebody believed in it. And this is not an accident, because the same guy who gave Steve Jobs his first check turned out is the same guy who gave Cisco their first money, and Yahoo their first money, and Google their first money. So these are smart guys. These do know what they're doing, and they're evaluating something that we mere mortals don't do, and can't do. Right? So if we explained it right, and it's harder because it's more abstract, then not only I'd look at a Steve Jobs and say, I don't know how to do what he does, but then I look at the banker and say, I really don't know what he does. And J.P. Morgan would be my example. The problem with banking today, and this is why the Occupy movement had some element of legitimacy, right? Some little fraction, is that government and banking are so interwound today. There's so much cronyism in banking today. It's the most crony of all industries. Well, when you see chairman of Goldman Sachs after chairman of Goldman Sachs after chairman of Goldman Sachs becoming Treasury Department, right? Secretary of the Treasury. And then you see Lehman going bust, but AIG being bailed out, and the counterparty in AIG is all Goldman Sachs, right? And you say, were they bailing out AIG to save Goldman Sachs? And whether you believe that or not, whether it's true, I don't know what exactly the numbers would have been. But it looks like Goldman Sachs being bailed out, the competitor Lehman is being allowed to go, that all this is being manipulated, that all these guys are in each other's pockets. When Rubin was chairman of Goldman Sachs, and he goes and becomes Treasury Secretary, then he's chairman of Citibank. It's all this, cabal looks like. That is upsetting, and that's legitimately upsetting. But then you have to ask the question of, where does cronyism come from? And my argument is cronyism comes from government, right? Government says, we want to regulate X. And what are the businessmen going to do? Say, okay, fine, do whatever you want. No, they're going to say, no, don't regulate us. And if you do regulate us, here's some better ways to do it versus worse ways to do it. And oh, by the way, now that you're regulating us, could you regulate those other guys as well? That's how it happens. And Microsoft's a great example of a lot of things. Before the Justice Department went after Microsoft in the early 1990s, how much money did Microsoft spend on lobbying? Exactly $0. Nothing. They were brought in front of Congress. Senator Orrin Hatch, the Republican, brought them in front of Congress, and they were lambasted for not lobbying. You need to give us our bill. Guess what? The Justice Department goes after them. And by the way, one of the things that they were accused of, you don't have corporate headquarters, you don't have a significant facility in DC. We don't need one. Yes, you do, right? Now, they spend tens of millions of dollars a year lobbying. They have a beautiful building in DC where they've got, I've spoken in the Microsoft building in DC, beautiful facilities, wonderful place. They lobby extensively because they learned the lesson. Justice Department went after them. And do they sometimes lobby to stop Google from doing something? Yeah. Once you get into that game, it gets distorted, it gets perverted, and you do ugly things. But the game gets initiated with the guy with a gun. So the way to stop cronyism is to get government out of the economy, is to prevent government from intervening in the economy. That's how you get rid of it. Don't blame businessmen for lobbying. Blame the government for regulating the business to begin with. Yeah. Go ahead.
Want me? Sorry. My question is actually more about, I guess, the future with I guess, the general trend of what you're talking about. Given, I guess, the recent, I mean, not even recent, but just the general trend towards statism, especially in the United States, at what point does it stop being profitable or even worth it for the businessmen to undergo, I guess, the struggle that you're talking about? At what point is it worth it, really, if I can draw into Atlas Shrugging?
Go to the strike.
It's the, yeah, I know, yeah, pretty much. At what point is it worth it for someone like, say, Hank Reardon to stop being Hank Reardon and start being
Oh, I mean, every businessman makes that decision for himself, but I found it interesting for the first time, I think, in American history, and maybe this happened earlier. In 2009, 10, in 8, 9, 10, you heard a lot of stories about people retiring early, slowing down, stopping to work as hard, and not because they couldn't or they couldn't make money, but because they felt oppressed. And there's a whole term that was out there called going gold, named after Atlas Shrugging. So it's the idea of I'm going gold, which means I'm withdrawing. I'm not going to work as hard. You want to tax me? Fine, but I'm just not going to work as hard. So the whole attitude of I'm withdrawing from society was present. Now, I don't think that's that prevalent. I don't think that's, but it keeps getting worse. And you go to Europe, and there are lots of businessmen working really hard. So I don't think that's what's going to bring everything, down. Businessmen are going to disappear like they do in Atlas. I think that we're experiencing much slower economic growth than we have historically. There's no reason to think that's going to change. It could get a lot worse in the future. I think we're more likely to just shrink out of inertia than we are because businessmen stop. Because I don't think they're committed to their own lives in that deep sense to cause them to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, business is fun. They enjoy it. They really live it.
So at least 6 CEOs of tech companies that are successful have dropped out of college or dropped out of grad school. And however, there's this perception in America that you need a degree to be successful. So there's this big bubble in education. And I'm curious about the source of that, if it's because of government subsidies or...
So you're curious about the source of the idea or the source of the bubble?
Both. I mean, they have to be, I guess they're related.
The idea is actually empirically true. So the fact, if you look at income over the last 20, 30 years, and you look at people with a college degree, independent of what that degree is in, and without a college degree, if you don't have a college degree, average, now this is on average, those 6 suddenly are above average, income is stagnant for people without a college degree, and income is rising for people with a college degree over the last 30 years. So there seems to be an educational premium in the marketplace for people. Now, whether that's self-selection, people who go to college would have succeeded anyway because they selected to go to college. There's a lot of things you can say about the study, but empirically, on its face, it looks like getting a degree pays, and not getting a degree doesn't. The 6 you mentioned, and people like that, would have been successful no matter what they would have done. I mean, they're just extraordinary human beings. The problem, I think, with this is once you break it out by type of degree, it makes a big difference what you get a degree in. Right? If you're getting a degree in the humanities, your income rises, but at a much slower rate than if you get a degree in engineering or even in business. So the more skill-oriented, now that wasn't the case historically. Historically, humanities paid off because Wall Street hired humanities graduates and others. But it's changing. It seems to be changing. We don't know this, but it seems to be changing. that the skills you're learning in humanities are less valuable. I think it has to do with what they're teaching over there, and the quality of the teaching, and the quality of the research, and the quality of the thinking in the humanities departments. That's what's causing this. But now the bubble, there are two bubbles. One is the number of people going to college, and the second is the cost of college. Now the cost of college, to me, the bubble is caused by government. Whenever the government gets into something and subsidizes it dramatically, you get a bubble in it. You've got a bubble in healthcare. Healthcare costs are going through the roof. People say, why are healthcare costs going up? It's because of technology. In every other industry, when you introduce technology, costs go up, right? No, they go down, right? LASIK. LASIK, the government doesn't pay for LASIK. Medicare, Medicaid doesn't cover LASIK. Guess what the cost of LASIK has been? Down, right? So 51 cents of every dollar spent in America on healthcare is paid for by government. Medicare, Medicaid primarily, but other programs as well. So the more money they spend on it, the higher the cost of healthcare is going to be. With Obamacare, it's just going to go up even faster, not slower. So education is being subsidized heavily, and therefore it's going up. And of course, this is all, just like with healthcare, this in some sense, the left doesn't care, because this is all leading to what? What's the way to solve the education bubble?
Free education.
Make it free. Absolutely. There's no bubble in the UK in education. There's no bubble in Europe in education, because the state pays for it all, right? So you don't see the price. You just pay the 2,000 participation, and the state covers the rest, and you never see it. There's no rising healthcare costs in Europe, because once you socialize it all, once you nationalize all of it, you hide the real costs. You hide it. You can see the costs going up in the private sector of healthcare in the United States. What about Medicaid? Are the costs going up in Medicaid? Yeah, but it's hidden, because nobody actually has to write a check, right? You go, you get your hip replaced, you're 80 years old, you get your hip replaced, and the government wrote the check. You didn't write a check. Nobody sees the rising cost of healthcare. So it's all leading to some kind of nationalization, whether it's free education or free healthcare. I mean, free, there's no free, but so that's the bubble. Peter Thiel, I don't know if you know Peter Thiel, one of the founders of PayPal, who's very active in the world out there. He pays kids not to go to college. If you've got an idea to start a business and you commit not to going to college, he'll give you $100,000, right, to start that business. And he's on this anti-going to college bent. Of course, he lectures at Stanford all the time. I'd have to ask him sometime why he does that. So there's definitely this idea that college is more and more of a waste of time. And what you'll see, I think the big challenge for colleges is going to be the internet, right? Because it's not the degree that's going to count in the future. What's going to count in the future, and what counts today, at the end of the day, is your skill set. And if you can attain those skills via an online education versus going to a school and and paying tuition, schools are going to have to, and they're realizing that, and you're seeing attempts at adaptation. But the whole education field is going to be shaken up quite a bit in the next 20 to 30 years, because technology is going to disrupt it, just like it disrupts everything else. So hopefully I answered that question.
I just wanted to continue on that. And I guess what I always thought of in terms of the education field is that not so much, because they always say like the stuff you learn in class is going to prepare you, like the job doesn't exist. What is it saying? Okay, sorry. So
it's not going to prepare you for a particular job, but it's going to give you the skills to take any job.
Yeah. So the skills that you learn today in class, are for jobs that aren't going to exist, that haven't been created yet. And so what I thought, what I always felt education was that you're proving that you have the ability to learn, as opposed to learning a skill set that they're going to use, because the things that you're learning in school right now might not be applicable when you get out. And so the process of going to school and learning is proving that you can learn and acquire these skills, and then weed out the people who can.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think employers view it that way. They look at you and say, A, if you could get accepted to UT, you must be smart. B, if you did well at UT, you must be smart. You can learn and you can adapt and you can do all these things. So therefore, you're qualified. The question is what happens if they find other tools to measure the same thing. right? And you're seeing that more and more. In Silicon Valley today, having a college degree has become less and less and less important for hiring, not just for the entrepreneurs who start the company, but even for hiring decisions. So I know people at Apple who will say, it used to be we only hired college grads, but today they're getting resumes from 18, 19-year-olds who've already built a website, started a little business, done this, done that, and they've proven their ability already, so it's less. The question is this, and the other question is, when Stanford only gives A's and B's, have you proven that you can learn? Because at Stanford, it's very hard to get a C, a D, or an F. I don't know what it's like at UT, but when I was teaching, failing was a huge deal, and you had to really work hard to justify failing somebody in a class. Right? Students would get very upset, and they would go, and other faculty, this wasn't politically correct to fail people. But the better the school, the more grade inflation there is. At least that's what I've seen. At Stanford is known for almost everybody gets A's and B's. So what are you actually measuring? And then, if what you're studying in the humanities is garbage, which I believe